So we're going to talk about your BMW postcard drafts. Overall, I think they were excellent starts. What I saw, I think there's some great ideas, some great thoughts. Like I said, um, really sort of paying attention to the details, client looks, etc., matching with client attitudes and all the things that we talked about, which was great. So we will go ahead and get started. All right, so starting with Kyle's. Again, that great start going to, looking like a BMW ad already in setup. There's a few things that I might suggest. And again, these are all kind of suggestions. Take them for what you want. I do like the white borders. You opted not to go with the bleed, and that's totally cool. So this will have a white border all the way around. And then going in with that white border, what I might do is, I see what you did here with having the frame be white so the BMW logo really shows. I might open up this frame just a little bit more and then kind of center. Obviously, maybe make it more square. I'm just kind of doing this. I can't not let that go there. All right. Give yourself a little bit of room. Center it more than that, obviously. And what I was thinking is even have it nudge to where there's a cutout almost of white, or even give yourself a little bit more room. Play with the sizing, but I thought maybe having like that white notch essentially might be kind of cool. Another suggestion is I like how these two images are up at the top. They fit in this black space nicely. I think that the text, while it matches the BMW ad, or the BMW attitude, I should say, very well, I think maybe more of a headline. This could be a great tagline if you wanted to have, introducing the all new, blah, blah, blah. If you wanted to have that down below, even significantly smaller, down below, or even on one line, maybe underneath this red strike here, or again, even one line down here, or even two. Again, play with the sizing. And then you would have this for, one of their, it doesn't have to be cutesy, but one of their sort of more creative headlines there. I know that's almost the hardest part. The other thing I might do is, I was double checking those are the same size. I was going to say double check and make sure that's the same size, but you already had clearly. Potentially play with the sizing of this a little bit. Again, you might want to, it goes right to the edge, but you might want to, I'm kind of all over the place, sorry, do that kind of like cutout thing again. You can even leave this space, make this space a little bit more even, but have this frame go right to the edge. Again, so you have this like white, give yourself maybe a little bit more of a white border and have that like cutout to match that cutout. Other than sort of like nitpicky stuff like that. I think overall is a really good look. Again, so just to sort of tighten it up, maybe playing around with this sort of notch, playing around with sizing here, doing that sort of bleed off into the border up top, potentially making this a sub headline or even just one line at the bottom or underneath here, and then having a headline. But I think overall it's a really good start. Take a look at Austin's cards. I'll start with this one. There's a little bit more to talk about with this one than the other one, so I figured I'd start with this one. I really like the concept. I like the idea of having this close-up detail image and having everything at an angle. The things I would say here would be to not angle the BMW logo. Generally, companies don't really, I should say generally, but companies like this, like BMW, generally doesn't often have just a single version, I should say, of their logo at angles and stuff. If they have multiples, they might do something a little bit more designy with it, but usually they're just kind of like in the ad. I know it's kind of boring, but again, I like the sort of concept of, having your text be at an angle. And then I think this section we could leave out, just completely take it out. That's kind of information that we can put on the back kind of thing. Maybe a little bit too much information, because keep in mind we're going to be able to put like in theory, like a novel on the back of this thing, because they're huge. So what I would suggest for this one maybe is, I really like this concept. If you wanted to make this picture smaller and maybe even have it start, give or take, here, and then you could have your headline and tagline, within whatever color, negative space here and here, sort of, so you have your drive in red here. And then have an actual image of, maybe do that same thing, like mirroring. So you have two images with like either space in between them or butted up against each other. But I was thinking you would want to have like a product shot, full on product shot. Usually using the detail shots are usually set just for that, for details. And you want a full product shot to make sure that clients know what you're seeing. Even if you go a little bit more abstract with it. But I was thinking you could keep that same sort of theme you have with this angular design and basically have a frame. You could split the whole thing evenly, but what I might suggest is, going a little bit more than half, maybe not quite 2/3, but a little bit more than half with the main image, and then a little bit less than half with this detail image, and then keeping that same kind of look, so your headline and tagline are essentially here, and then you could kind of tuck the BMW logo here, or even left, or any of the corners, to be honest, and have the BMW logo a little bit more, somewhat of a simple placement. But again, I like there's some strong concepts here that could really work. Oh, and sorry, lastly, I would choose a different font. I would choose a font maybe like Helvetica or Arial or something like that would sort of go along more with BMW. Those sort of strong, they have their own Helvetica that I mentioned in class, which is ridiculous. But sticking with that kind of a font, like a heavier, bolder font for these. Right, card number 2. I think this one, there's a little bit less to say about it in a good way. I think and I saw you working on it in class as well, but the sort of nitpicky thing I would say about this one would be to change the font. Again, go with that more BMW type font, a heavier, bolder font, maybe having it fill up the space a little bit more, whether you go with all caps or title caps, which is all caps, but the first letter of each word is capitalized a little bit, or just plain old all caps. I might play around with the colors. I kind of like this pop of yellow that you put in here. Maybe if you picked something from this, sunrise picture or sunset, whichever one it is, you might be able to even use the eyedropper and pick up, that sort of golden yellowy color to have it here. And then maybe even try making this one white or keeping this one yellow, so really the only pop of color in the text is here. But yeah, really, other than that, I think maybe potentially making the BMW logo a little bit smaller, but I don't think it's too crazy. Oh, I turned off all my things so I give myself some real estate. I don't think it's too bad. We'll see what actual size it is, but the properties tell me. Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's not too bad. About 1.25 inches by almost 1.5 inches. Yeah, so it's probably about, you could leave it that size. Yeah, I like what you did. We talked about this in class too, but I like what you did with this sort of transparent frame to give yourself a little bit of a darker background, but also fitting within the image, and not sort of being so harsh, sticking out so much with the image. But yeah, aside from the nitpicky, changing fonts again, playing around with the colors, I think your placement works really well. I think your image works really well. The graphics are excellent. Gives you a little bit of movement, gives you that sort of bringing your eye through the piece like we've been hammering all semester. So your eye kind of goes around, and even in this sort of arc through the bottom, and then having the car point this way kind of brings your eye back through. You have a nice balance between, a visual balance between, sort of more heavy positive space here with a negative open space here. I think it's really well done. I think both, again, it's up to you which one you use. I think both could be successful depending on the tweaks that you have. Next up, Thomas's. Again, you have two really strong ideas here. Very strong with the graphics and the placement. Again, some sort of somewhat nitpicky suggestions for you. We'll start with this one. I know we talked about it again in class. I think the graphic here is really strong. The layout is really well done. There's a few little nitpicky things I might try. I kind of like this even spacing you have here. I might even suggest maybe tightening these up a little bit, but having the spacing, I could just do it. Having the spacing tighten up a little bit too. Uh-oh, as my whole thing freezes. There we go. So you're tightening up your spacing a little bit as well. Maybe not even that close, and then you could have an even thinner line with even thinner spacing, if that makes sense. Again, sort of nitpicky to give that a little bit more action and sort of spread that positive negative space, that sort of swap of positive and negative space. Even if you had this space here as wide as this one, and then the next one, this space here as wide as this one, and then one more smaller, if you get what I mean. That sort of gives that directional movement again. Generally, they don't, well, I shouldn't say they don't, but clients, especially BMW, rarely uses just a rear shot. They might do a rear 3/4. I don't know if there's another image that has this kind of road idea that shows a little bit more of the car in a way that you would want it to work. I do like, conceptually, I do really like what you did, sort of the facing forward, going down the road, making your own route, that whole thing. I think it works very well conceptually, so I feel like for the assignment, I think it's great. I think it works really well. I feel like the client may or may not have you change that. We can look for another image, but if not, obviously, if there's one that doesn't work as well for the purposes of the assignment, I think it works very well. Lastly, the sort of nitpicky thing I might do is I might make this a little bit smaller. Break this up so this is on one line, so you have your don't just make your route, and then you can have comma, and then you can have the own it on a separate line, maybe down here. So you have don't just make your route, own it, again, sort of breaking up that text, giving that sort of visual pause, or even like seeing about tucking it down here. Maybe you can make this a little bit smaller even and tuck that own it down here, even have own it in all caps. Maybe try that, but just to sort of separate those. It's not that they're two separate thoughts, but sort of to separate that pause and give it like a visual pause, I think might work really well. All right, and then next one, again, we have a really good, strong use of simple graphics. I think the color works really well, picking up sort of the color of the road-ish in here, and then the transparency works really well. I think, again, just some minor sort of nitpicky things. We might be able to make this a tiny bit smaller. And also, I might play with this graphic and have that be a touch smaller. Oops, as I just hit the wrong thing. There we go. Bring this down just a little bit. To, again, give yourself where the trim would be. You could even bring this right down, almost right down to the trim, and give yourself like a little bit of a border here, and then kind of do the same thing here. If you made this a little bit smaller, the text just a tiny bit smaller, I would just say now watch it on the road. Yeah, you've seen it on paper, now watch. Yeah. Sorry, I'm thinking how it reads. I think the extra word there makes it a little bit clunky. So if you've seen it on paper, and then see if you could even fit it here, like now watch it on the road, something like that. Separate it a little bit, maybe make it a little bit smaller. Give yourself a little bit of space there too, because you might be able to nudge this up just a little bit, and then nudge this whole graphic. I like the idea though of having more of a border at the top than at the bottom, and again, to sort of go along with that, this is larger than this, obviously, but if you gave yourself a little bit of room to bring that up more, a little bit away from the car, you could drop the car down slightly if you have the room, as well as I'm just kind of like doing it. That doesn't so much work with the graphic there, but anyway, play around with it. See if those minor tweaks would work for you. But yeah, I think, again, just kind of like adjusting the text a little bit, maybe playing with the graphics and seeing how they work. if you like it, if you don't. But I think two very strong looks that, again, it's up to you which one you go with, but I think both could make very strong designs. All right, next up, Ashton. So, again, two pretty strong starts. Definitely some things we can improve on and potentially move around, and we'll start talking about this one. I like what you've done with the idea of having these balanced with, a larger image and a smaller image, and then sort of balancing out this negative space. I think we can work on that a little bit more and push that a little bit. What I might do is actually give yourself more space with this image. I would make that a little bit bigger, maybe even, going across, again, not quite 2/3, but going across, again, as I just do it, again, maybe give or take about there. So there's a little bit of visual overlap. And then you can fit this image, more directly, even make this image a little bit more bigger. That's more bigger. That's not a thing. Make it even bigger. I'm a college professor, I promise. Anyway. Yeah, make that a little bit bigger. Focus on the car a little bit more. Make that product shot a little bit larger. And then you can have these two detail shots. I don't know if they're the same size, and they are. Good. Oops, I had the wrong button. Having these two detail shots, even a little bit less, a little bit smaller, to give these a little bit more breathing room. Or if you were going to pick another shot, maybe pick two actual detail shots. Yeah, or I would take these two, maybe even make these frames a little bit narrower and fitting the images within them that way, if that makes sense. Because I do kind of like these images, and then this one's going to be, I think I nudged it by accident. Give or take, have those fit a little bit better. And then that might even out your negative space a little bit more. And then talking about that negative space, I like your concept for headline. We talked a little bit about it in class. I think we could simplify it a little bit more, right? So I think we could take this logo and maybe tuck it into the bottom corner, even if we, made it significantly smaller, give or take about 1.25 by 1.25, 1.5 at most probably. And then you could fit the new active hybrid X6 maybe on one line here, give or take. And then this frees up room here. We could drop this frame down a little bit to give yourself a little bit of room. Again, all give or take. So we have this logo smaller down here. We'll say I won't resize. This will be smaller down here, give or take, resized. And then we can work on this headline, which I think is excellent. A little bit wordy. So you could have not all heroes wear capes on one line, and then you could have some have to drive, and then that sort of explains your message. Or you could even have what better way to drive than with and have that be a little block of text here, or a smaller block of text, where we'd have the BMW logo ending. Obviously it wouldn't be this big, ending here, and you could have a smaller block of text here, something like that. So I think it's just some rearrangement of the images, some resizing, and some adjusting of the text. And I also think going with that Helvetica, or more of a bolder, blockier font like that, as well. But I think overall just some minor, relatively minor changes. I think the concept was really strong. One thing that I will also say, and it shows more in the next one, is to watch when you're resizing, to either make sure you're holding shift, or that you're resizing here, and you have your maintained proportions or constrained proportions. So this way, if you're to make this 1 inch and tab through, it automatically resizes, so you don't get that stretch that you're getting a little bit here. The BMW logo has been stretched a little bit. I think this image maybe was stretched. I think the image in one of your images in the previous was a little bit stretched as well. So you just gotta watch out for that. No big deal. If we watch out for it. So I wanted to make sure, that I mentioned that. I think, again, a strong concept. I think we could somewhat do, kind of a similar thing if you wanted to have this set up. Again, have this BMW logo, sort of up in the top corner. give or take. So it's about same-ish size, 1.25 inches, 1.5 give or take in this corner. And then that sort of frees up space. You could have, again, I like the concept, but I think just a little bit of editing and separation. So you'd have like, again, keep this separate. So the new BMW Active Hybrid X6. You could have, at the top, Halloween is over. It's time to start getting ready for Christmas. Or even Halloween is over, time to start getting ready for Christmas. Simplify it a little bit. Have that maybe on one line. And then again, you could kind of simplify this a little bit more and go here. Like, why not get them something that can rev up their engines for the holidays? Or you could say, I'm trying to think of how we could even simplify that. Or you could say, get them something, sort of get rid of some of the words we can trim, or even just say rev up their engines for the holidays. Even simplify to their Halloween is over, rev up their engines for the holidays, and have like a headline and a sub headline. Even if you had one here and sort of one here, or even underneath each other, Halloween is over, next line, rev up their engines for the holidays. And then you could have your Active Hybrid X6 info here. And then that would sort of free up room. Again, I would say a similar thing. Make this image a bit bigger. If we give or take, went about halfway, a little bit more maybe. And then have these details maybe be the same size, maybe split the difference between these two sizes. Kind of like your other one, how you had your, maybe not that small, but how you had these two images the same size. Have these two images the same size, maybe tucked a little bit more to the left, and then that would free up some space here. But then that would also give you a little bit of design balance, where you would have, relatively, you would have your negative space, even though there's text in the logo, your negative space with more green showing through and then less green showing through here. So you would have that nice compositional balance there. So I think, again, these are two really good starts, and I think with some tweaks and some repositioning, resizing a little bit, I think either one of these could work really well. James is up. Again, two really strong ideas. There's a couple of design things that you did here that, again, I sort of see, I recognize why you made those choices. I think for general design and compositional choices, I think they're great. I think as far as more sort of commercial purposes, they don't work so well. And we'll get to those. Not a big deal. Again, I think with some tweaking. I like this image. I like the use of the overlays here work really well. This gradient I think works very well. I think this is one of the things I was talking about. I think like your alignment works really well here. I totally see what you're doing, where you had this, this sort of baseline here aligned with this center line of the logo. I think it's a great design choice. I think for, again, it's sort of more commercially, I don't necessarily think that that would really work as far as a client is concerned. I might just, I know it's really boring, but I might sort of simply just tuck this, into this corner here, even a little bit smaller. So you have room as I'm messing with the frame. There we go. Oops, I missed shift and I squished it like I'm telling you guys not to do. So if you had the logo, give or take, give or take, tucked into this corner here, 1.25 inches or so. Try not to, I just cut that top off, I think. We'll make sure that we don't do that. I just did anyway. But I think tucking that so it's a little bit cleaner look for the client. And then that would, I think, free up room. I like what you did with the text. I actually like your tagline here. I think it's funny. I don't think it's something that BMW might shy away from. I think they might go for it. What I would do is you kind of have the same information here twice. So I would honestly just kind of get rid of this, and maybe even get rid of this, and then you could have the new Active Hybrid X6 line down here, a little bit small, somewhere split the difference maybe between the two sizes, and I would go with a font closer to this. And then you might even be able to bring this graphic down just slightly, to get it off of the car just a little bit, and then have that on one line, new active hybrid, blah, blah, blah. You could lose this because that kind of information will probably go on the back of the card. I see why you did it. I think it works, but for the sort of commercial purposes again. And then I would turn this into a headline. I would have, it's super simple, very short, so you could have it be pretty large. You could have the feeling wet here, and then even here on another line, we get it there, and then have that visual not be there. So it's just, again, more simple, and just have the two lines there. And I think that commercially would work very well, and especially sort of how BMW is and their sort of attitudes and all that fun stuff, I think would work really well. I think overall, a super strong design with some relatively minor tweaks. I think we have the same going on here. I really like what you did visually, and for this one, I want to make suggestions that wouldn't take away from what you did, and sort of go with it. I think you have a lot going on, even too much going on, so that's kind of where I would take this one. I really like this graphic. What I might do is I might pull this graphic up even more so that the image top to bottom has a bleed, and then if you have the space with the image, which you might, well, you may or may not. You might have to mess with the image just a little bit. Yeah, you don't have the full. But if you mess with the image just slightly to get it at least close to that bleed. Oh, I didn't hit shift. Close to that bleed, as it's not letting me resize. There you go. And obviously you'd have to play around with the placement and all that fun stuff. But I think you could do it. But yeah, I think if this, I think I pulled it past the bleed. Your bleed is here, but you get the idea. I might play with that. So you have a bleed with the image top and bottom, and then you have this purposely uneven border. I think would work really well. So you would have just a little bit here with the trim, and then you'd have more of a black border here. I think I really like that idea of having that uneven border to create that sort of movement that more dynamic layout right there. But I think pushing that more and having the bleed from the image go top and bottom, I think might be kind of cool. I really like what you did with this treatment. Again, you'll have to play around with the image, the sizing. I'm not re-uploading this, so you won't have my changes in here, but you'd have to play around with the sizing and how you would manipulate this. But I really like this treatment where you have the new in the positive and negative space and have that flipped. I think it works really well. I like the X6, maybe even give or take-ish there, if you play with the image and all that fun stuff. I think this is where it gets a little bit cluttered. I think this is really funny, but I don't think you're allowed, honestly, to attack your competitors directly. I think you can make references to it, but I don't think you can actually do that. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's a thing. Anyway, but I would get rid of this because it's just sort of visually cluttered anyway. Maybe make the logo just a tiny bit smaller, but I think it works really well in this space. Again, I would lose this information because that could go on the back. So if we were to sort of quickly lose that information, and then I like where this is, even if you gave it either a border there, the same border, or just pushed it right up against the safe area, had it like that, and then that opens you up for having this, and you could maybe even reflect that same thing where you had shift in white and then worlds above the rest, something like that, so it's sort of separated a little bit. But I would turn this into a headline. I might even put it across the bottom here, and you could even still do that same treatment where if you had, shift. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but you get the idea. Even have that same sort of treatment if you had the shift in white and even all caps, worlds above the rest, and had that across the bottom. I feel like visually that would open it up. Again, if we got rid of that, and then you had your text here, obviously in white or in a lighter color. But you had it here down across the bottom. You can see now it sort of opens up. It opens up the image more. It brings the eye, again, as we've been talking about all semester, brings your eye through the piece. The last sort of nitpicky thing I might do, again, is either decide, if you want to give yourself a border there or not. You'll still have a little bit of a border with the trim, so I think you'd be fine. So you'd still have a border there, or do you want it to go directly to the edge? I don't think that would work. If to have that bleed off, nah, I would keep it sort of there, give or take there, so you have a little bit of a border. But I think that sort of opens it up. I think just some, we've talked about editing in a couple classes. I think just a little bit of editing, literally, getting rid of some things that don't need to be there, that are sort of visually making it a little bit chaotic, and sort of cleaning up that chaos and refining your design a little bit more can make this a really strong design as well. You have two very strong designs. It's a tough choice which one to adjust, but I think both of them could make a really strong commercial design.